So kind of to start bringing things together, we've talked about all the different factors that impact youth development and what the outcome is. What we find again is depending on the interaction between the individual, the young person, and the varying different contexts that they're in, the number of protective factors, the number of risk factors they're exposed to, how that interacts together, how it impacts how it interacts with the young person, how the young person impacts the environment. All of these factors result in numerous potential pathways, which can be illustrated by the pinball machine. Depending, each one of those little knobs refers to a different experience, different situation, different factor that's in a person's environment. Depending on the angle in which it hits, depending on where the placement of the knobs are, the ball is going to go in different direction. And that's kind of a nice analogy to when you think about Muslim youth development. Again, what are those factors? We need to understand those factors. Depending on the placement of those factors, what are the placement of the protective factors and risk factors, you're going to have different developmental outcomes. And so many of you may be familiar with our infographic that really was highlighting the current rates, the rates of Muslim youth risk behavior. Again, the reason for us to really focus on risk behaviors is because these were issues that we were noticing on the ground across the nation, but had no real understanding of what was the prevalence level within Muslim communities. And so as we're doing our research, we're really trying to focus on the areas that are will have most greatest impact on the community. So understanding the prevalence will also allow us to then follow up with, okay, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to educate the community? How are we going to build awareness so that parents are aware and can take protective measures and preventative measures? So as a community, we also need to understand what are the other, we talked about earlier, the nuances. Like for example, one of the research areas that we look into are what are the unique issues and challenges facing the Black Muslim youth. In terms of how are they similar or different to their peers. Again, that's an individual factor. How does the race factor impact their development? Similarly for convert youth, we have another research team, which Hanan is part of, where we're really investigating the experiences for those young people to, again, try to understand what are the different kind of pinball pegs that are in a young person's life that can impact their developmental trajectory. And as adults, if we are aware of the nuances, then we are then able to develop more appropriate programming to help strengthen young people. And really, FYI is really trying to help support you towards this effort. One of the things that we do have, another resource that we have for the community to really benefit from, is a workshop that goes into a lot of what we talked about in greater detail.
Expecting to learn something very useful, how to mentor youth, how, this mentorship, it's not only for youth, it's really impacts everybody. It's just getting a better perspective of how people think and how to best advise them. I kind of wanted to learn something about that, and I learned that and much more including here.
One of the big challenges that we face as Muslim youth in America is understanding how different systems impact their development. One of the things we want to bring out in this workshop is giving a holistic picture of the challenges Muslim youth face at home, in their schools, within their communities, and within the greater context of living in America as Muslim youth. One of the other challenges we see is the inability for some of the adult mentors to connect and relate to the Muslim youth.
This workshop is really about helping individuals who are working with American Muslim youth, be it in the schools, be it in the masajids, and as youth workers, or even as parents, to really give them the knowledge to understand what are the issues facing Muslim youth, to help them understand what are the challenges that young people that they're working with may face, understand what are the factors that may negatively impact their development, what are the factors that can really help them develop themselves in a positive direction. And it really takes those skills and that knowledge and gives that to individuals who are working in these environments principles that they can then take into their community and really think about how can I use this information in the various settings. And then another thing is we do then is take that information and apply it within the mentoring context. How would you mentor the individual at an individual level, within a one-on-one interaction? How would you use that information within a group context? How do you use that relationship to help promote their development?
If it could be taught to all the, parents, youth, everybody in the society, it would do a great deal of good. Just knowing the basic things like, what type of support systems people have, how to engage them about sensitive topics. Like that's something, a skill that a lot of people in the community, can develop, and by growing that skill, it really helps expose a lot of the problems and deals with them too. So it's a very useful thing to have.
Just to give my feedback, it was an excellent program. It taught me many different things about the youth, and anyone that wants to understand how to work with the youth and understand how to help mentor the youth, I think this is a program that they should take. I heard about it on Facebook, and when I came to it, I had some reservations about it, but after going through it, I see why it is a great program and where you can learn many things. I think it will be very beneficial, inshallah ta'ala.
Workshop. We really want to teach those communication skills, how to cultivate a relationship, how to develop effective programming, how to help youth in a way that's meaningful for them. And we really hope that the participants over the course of the last 2 days and 16 hours of this workshop were able to understand this bigger picture, the bigger issues facing Muslim youth, what factors to consider while working with youth and developing programs, but more importantly, how to work with youth one-on-one in a way that cultivates a strong relationship, but also is meaningful to the youth as well.
So before we open up for questions, we hope that this presentation was informative. And if you go into the State of American Muslim Youth report that we co-published with ISPU, you'll find a lot more details about specifically what are the different factors, what are the different specific ideas and recommendations we have that you can use at different in the different contexts. But in addition, if you're interested in more details about the studies that we did cite, all of our academic publications are available on our website at www.thefyi.org, especially specific questions about methodology, sample size, etc. But please do use FYI as a resource. Obviously, cite our work appropriately, but really, this is for the community. Our ability to impact the individuals, young people, and their families is only as useful as other people share and use that information. So we do ask for your help to be an ambassador and share our work with as many people as you know, so that we can have an impact and we can help support and strengthen young people. In addition, we also have 2 upcoming webinars for those who are interested in learning more. You can sign up onto our email list as well as like us on Facebook in order to get regular updates. The 2 topics are, again, continuing our discussion on risk behaviors in American Muslim youth, and that will be hosted in partnership with ICNA, Young Muslims. And secondly, homework with boys, prevention through preparation. Again, this is a challenge many of us do face because we have to realize there are differences that we need to help work with and adjust our teaching styles and educational style and homework preparation. So we invite you to both of those webinars as well. And I will turn it over to Camila.
Okay. Well, thank you, all three of you, really so much for that presentation. I was, trying to take notes and tweet at the same time. I think because some of the points that you highlighted, particularly as it relates to how you can begin to integrate some of the really the great research that you've been able to uncover as it relates to young people is really so important. And so just a few of the points that I highlighted and marked. One is that we have to be very aware of our, I think, Sadek, you termed it like congregational culture. What are the expectations when a young person is beginning to become more involved in different masajid or Islamic organizations? And I think, Hanan, you also mentioned this. How are we modeling appropriate behavior as adults? Sometimes we wonder, like, oh, why are the youth behaving this way? We don't understand. What are they doing? But we aren't being very self-reflective, about some of the things that they're actually witnessing the adults in their lives do, and kind of how they're behaving. So I thought that was really important. As well as to understand the question that you asked, Sadek, was what is the long-term impact? If our children are spending 6 hours a day or 7 hours a day in school, and they are confronted by an educator who is not very nurturing or supportive of them, or treats them negatively because of their race or religion, what is the long-term impact of that exposure to that adult? And I wanted to know if you could expand, just, or three of you could expand a little bit about that point, because I think, again, Ahmed Mohammed really is a great example of, a young person who clearly has tremendous family support and community support. So while he understood why people were viewing him in such a negative light, when I watched the clip of the press conference, he was smiling. It was just really amazing to see, his family behind him, to hear how, well he was able to express himself and some of the thoughts he had. So just, kind of expanding a little bit on that point, that, being aware of the long-term impact of that exposure, and then what we can do as, parents and educators and the community members to offer, to be able to buffer some of that negativity.
Samira.
So I think part of what we do need to realize, we do need to have our young people aware of reality, but at the same time, with that reality, try to help them, provide them with opportunities and ideas of how people have buffered, how do you cope with it, and really teaching them the coping skills. Because for us to expect that, now that this situation happened with Ahmed, everything's okay, let's, do kumbaya, that's not going to happen. So it's very important for us to, on the one hand, help them realize that this is real, Islamophobia is real, and it can impact you, and really helping them and learning actually a lot from the Black Lives Matter movement, and helping us realize, okay, this is our reality, there is racism that's being institutionalized, and for us to realize and learn from the experiences of the Black community, because there's so much that we can use and benefit from. So helping them realize reality is one. Second, give them tools and understanding of when these situations happen. For example, looking at Ahmed's situation, these are things that happened that should not have happened. And these are the different ways that you can do to protect yourself. But at the same time, really focusing on the fact that, okay, he was supported, he had his family, he had the community behind him. And also within our communities, having these discussions and having a place where young people can talk about situations and environments where they feel bullied, where they don't feel safe. A recent report came out by CARE, I believe, just was stating how about almost 50% of young people indicated that they had experienced somebody in the school, either peer teachers or somebody else, saying something negative about their religion or themselves because of their religion or their ethnic background. Now, what was really interesting was many of the young people didn't share that information with the school officials, their parents, because they didn't feel empowered. And that's one thing that we do need to counter, and that's something that we can do as parents as well as community members, learning and helping to support young people to have their voice and express their voice and feel supported that they can make a difference. And I think this example of Ahmed is really wonderful to helping them realize this fact.
Mm-hmm. I think also just focusing on, in addition to what Samira mentioned, focus on identity development and cultivation. And so putting a lot of focus on the diversity that exists within our communities, and to spend a lot of time educating immigrant Muslims about African American culture, Latino culture, and the other cultures that exist within our communities as well, and vice versa. But I think that's incredibly important because it builds a child's sense of self, and they develop this schema, this idea that the story they tell themselves about themselves. And so if they grow up feeling being Muslim is something to be proud of, being Black, being Latino, being South Asian, Arab is something to be proud of, that creates an incredible protective factor. And so during those formative years, they grow up feeling pride in terms of being different from the dominant culture that exists within the school environment. And so when they go to school, they're able to discern between incidents of racism or ignorance versus when they do experience it at school, and they grow up in a household where they're taught that they're less than, inferior, you're not good enough, and then they go to school and they're treated differently because they are Black or because they are Muslim. They almost internalize that. It's that same message being reinforced, that I'm not good enough because at home I'm not smart enough, but at school because I'm not a certain religion or a certain race. And so to be very mindful as we're in communities, as we're raising our youth, how that impacts them.
And just to add to both of your points, you know, we can talk to our kids about, you know, what are the possible things that can happen to you, but, you know, it's inevitable that, you know, maybe they do run into a situation where they don't know what to do. So developing those relationships just on the basic level, whether you're a mentor or a parent, gives that youth, you know, a place to go back to and ask questions and say, hey, this happened to me, I don't know what to do, instead of, you know, with the case of the kids in the school, they just think, oh, well, this is just a part of being Muslim in America. You know, I have no power to do anything.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, again, kind of going back to the idea that children and youth are watching adults. You know, how are adults responding to Islamophobia? You know, because adults are also experiencing harassment in the workplace. You know, just recently with the case of Cherie Stanley, the flight attendant, you know, who refused to serve alcohol. And so, you know, thinking about our community's response to that, you know, someone who wanted to adhere to her understanding of Islam and how it impacted her work, our response to that also influences how our children are going to respond. So sometimes there's this idea that we try to act as if we are unaffected by all of these stressors, which is not the case. We're deeply impacted, you know, on a daily basis by these microaggressions. So when we're asking people, you know, or if we ask the question of our children, you know, how's school today? Right? We always ask, well, how was school today? We maybe have to think of more nuanced questions. And, you know, I want to kind of throw that over to you guys. What are some of the questions that parents can begin to routinely ask so that if something does occur, they've already kind of set up a ritual where there's some communication either before school, after school, who did you eat with today, who is your best friend, because we don't want there to be an instance where there's a crisis and they've really experienced something negative in school and they just don't know how to express it because we never talk about how Islamophobia is impacting us. Right, so they don't know how to share that information. So I'm wondering, you know, what would be some of your recommendations as to how we can begin to set up or carve out a space, you know, in our daily kind of family schedule to allow for those conversations to happen.
You know, Camila, you raised a really important point, and that is really how do you develop the mechanisms for communication? And one of the things that we find in the literature is the stronger communication between parent and child that exists, the more likely the child will share with their parents issues that do come up. And that really actually, what happens, what I find is oftentimes parents don't put in the investment early on. And it's never too late, but it makes it easier to start the process when children are young. So when they come home from school, again, on the car ride home, what did you eat? What did you do at recess? Because recess and the time periods where they're not very structured are usually when you see a lot more interaction that's not monitored, and that's where you start seeing some of the bullying take place, or you have a chance to get to see your child's personality. So that's really looking at the unstructured time at school, asking them about what was the best part of the day, what was the worst part of the day, creates opportunities to talk to your child. And often on Facebook we have a number of lists of questions you could ask your kid, because as kids get older, they sometimes, if they're not used to talking on a regular basis, they don't have those rituals where they know that this is the time I'm going to be talking to my parents, they're going to slowly shut down. So really it's important for parents to have certain rituals, set them up early. It could be after school, it could be during dinner meal times if you're able to eat dinner together. A lot of times parents may put their kids to sleep by reading a book. Well, that's a really special moment where you can connect with your child and talk about not only the book, but also kind of snuggling and really talking about what's on your mind, what are you thinking about for the next day. So really having those rituals are really important, because as a child gets older, they are going to want to have sometimes conversations one-on-one with you. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is, like you said, really modeling behaviors, thought process, frustrations. So if as a parent you've had a frustrating experience at work where you suspect racism may be in place, or Islamophobia may be impacting the treatment that you have, or just anything in general, experiences difficult days, really modeling how you cope as an adult really set kind of a precedent for your kids, because you're modeling, and whatever you do, that is more likely what they're going to absorb, not what you say. You know that old adage, children follow what you do, not what you say. That's just really important. So if you're able to kind of verbalize the thoughts that you have, the frustrations, and then channel that information, those experiences, such that is productive and proactive, then that would really be helpful.
I don't know if either you, Sadiq, or Hanan have something to add, but I think some of those kind of brief tips for adults, especially if you're talking about youth who in general may not be as verbal with their parents. Mm-hmm. They're trying to pull back a little, have their own space and privacy, develop their own identities. Mm-hmm. But I think there's still some value to, even if they don't express it, that you're curious about their day. You're kind of curious, and kind of openly curious, not looking, to pry information. I need to know every detail of your life, but to say, I'm actually curious about what happens to you on a daily basis. Like, it really matters to me that you're happy and that you're satisfied kind of with your school environment, with your peers. And when I think about how many young people watched and saw the tweets and the Facebook comments about Ahmed, I thought this is great for them to witness. But at the same time, I wondered how many of our young people have experienced something similar, and it did not kind of make national or international news. So now I think this definitely becomes an opening, kind of almost like a classical teaching moment, where we can have these conversations with our children. I remember one of the conversations I had with my daughter, she's 12, when she told me that they were talking about current events and social studies, and a classmate asked her, said, "Oh, Layla, isn't your mom a part of ISIS?" And she felt like she froze. She was like, I thought the teacher was going to correct her. I thought, she was like, I was just so angry. I didn't know what to say. The teacher, like the adult in the room, didn't do anything. So it wasn't even at that moment so much the content, but helping her through her feelings about it. So I think with the story of Ahmed and his treatment, what we should assume, I think, is that perhaps the majority of our children have experienced something similar. maybe not as severe as being arrested, but a moment in which they felt marginalized, that they felt that they were being mistreated, but didn't know what to say, didn't know where to, what to do with that emotion, and some of it, the anger as well.
I think it's important that just as parents to realize the power dynamic that exists between an adult and a child, there exists in multiple different types of relationships, a colleague and your boss, but recognize that power differential and how what a teacher says or doesn't say can really impact a child. And purely not based on content, but based on that power dynamic or that power differential that exists between the teacher and the child. I think what we saw in the example of Ahmed was how that power dynamic worked in a very different manner. We saw some of the most influential individuals in America, in the world, basically express, praised for what he did. And so really how that power differential and that dynamic was used in a very positive manner. But to realize that in a lot of these instances of microaggressions, micro-racism, and racism that children may experience within the school, that oftentimes that power differential is used in a way to really reinforce stereotypes and prejudices. And so to really cultivate that relationship with your child, let them talk to you, ask open-ended questions, how and what, really work on that. In order to get your relationship to a point where they can speak openly about these experiences without feeling that you might overreact or embarrass them at school or make it worse than it already is.
I think also making them feel that you're there to listen, and if they feel in their interaction with you as a parent or with you as a youth mentor that you are listening and that you will empower them to help do what they want is really important, because oftentimes they don't have places where they can talk about what's on their mind. Oftentimes as parents we talk at our kids and not with our kids. So that's another thing. We may have conversations. What's the quality of the conversation? Does the young person have the voice to express what's on their mind? And then as youth mentors as well, can we practice in our programming how young people can react to different situations? Because what happens sometimes is when the situations occur, just like what you said with your daughter, Camila, young people freeze and then they don't know what to do, and only after they realize what's happened, and then they feel like, oh, it's too late. What can I do? It happened, and it was just a second. Oh, I'm making a big deal out of nothing. When in reality, that big deal is something. And if we can help our kids practice, if a situation doesn't arise, how you can handle, who can you talk to, what can you do, you're really giving them, equipping them the skills. And the more they practice, the more confident they will feel about raising their concerns and voicing their feelings.
And Hanan, was there just kind of thinking about what are some of the tips that we can provide for parents, but also for young people who encounter, it reminds you of, how do we deal with racial microaggressions? When someone is telling you, oh, you're just overreacting, that didn't really happen, that's not the case, well, that person isn't racist, as if that absolves them of, not treating people in a certain way. So what can young people do, or how can we equip them with skills that'll help, be able to manage their emotion in the moment, but also to know, I think, like you said, Tamira, that it's never too late. If something occurs and it impacts you in a certain way, you still have every right. It doesn't matter if it's a month later. You still have every right to express how that particular incident made you feel, and then be able to know who are the safe people in my environment that I can express this to. So is there anything else that you would, suggest for parents or for young people who are struggling with some of these incidents?
Yeah, so a suggestion I would have for parents is that, sometimes kids just don't feel comfortable talking to the parent. So, finding those mentors in the community to connect them with is very important, because if that way it gives the kids multiple options on, if they don't feel comfortable with talking to the parent, they can go talk to their mentor, or if they don't feel talking to they don't feel comfortable talking to the mentor, there could also be maybe extended family. So connecting the youth with more, with good role models and giving them more options and people to go to. Because, a youth may click with one person and not the other. So I would say just giving them more options.
So how would you respond to a parent, though, that feels like, well, my children should come to me, and almost feel betrayed if they go to another adult in order to express some of the hurtful feelings that they're trying to cope with? What would your advice be to, to the parent or, the caregiver, if they feel like, well, no, my children should only speak to me about these issues?
I'd probably just remind them that, the kid is going to have different, contexts. Again, whether it's the peer or the community, they have those friends, they have friend groups. So if you stop them from, obtaining the good role models, they're going to find someone else to talk to that, that you don't know about. It's going to happen. So, it's better for you to be aware of the relationships that they have, to be aware of who they're talking to and who they're going to for advice, rather than limiting their options. And of course, we're human, we're not perfect, we don't know everything. So, it is a great help for the parent as well.
And I wanted to just shift slightly because I'm curious to know what were the I guess most surprising about the research that you found, the data, because when you put out the infographic and you're talking about the risky behavior that youth are engaging in, I know there was possibly some pushback, saying no, that's not true. Our young people are not using drugs, they're not having sex, they're not, all these things that they are not doing. But from your report, from the research that you conducted, there were some findings that I'm sure were very surprising, either to you or to just many other people. So I'm just curious to know, what was most surprising for you guys?
I think the lack of gender difference was a big surprise for me. That was one thing that was big for me. And then also the fact that even individuals who identify as being religious or identify with the faith closely, and that it's very important to them, they're also engaging in these behaviors. So I think to me those are the two things that we need to realize as a community. First of all, that study was looking at a sample that consists of individuals who are both mosque going as well as not mosque going. So that's important to realize. A lot of people were concerned that the numbers seemed very high, but the reality is many of these individuals we may not be seeing at the masjid. But even when we look at other studies that we've done looking at individuals who are at the masjid, you still see at least minimum of 10% of young people who are engaging in some of these behaviors. Now, if we talk to individuals, young people who are actually on campus, they're actually telling us that our numbers are very low compared to what they're seeing. So I guess the big thing was, one, the lack of gender difference, and two, the fact that even individuals who identify themselves or indicate that religious activity, religion is important to them, that they're also engaging in these behaviors.
It's interesting because last week a group of us that all went to school down in Urbana-Champaign got together. It's 10 years since I shouldn't age myself, but we were talking about those statistics, and I asked, are you guys surprised? And they all looked around and said, no, sounds about right. I mean, not to name any names, but we had an idea of who was on campus and who was Muslim and who may have identified with the masjid community didn't, but we all kind of nodded our heads and saying, yeah, that seems like the right numbers based on our experiences. So I think a couple things to keep in mind that I want to reemphasize is, when we look at sample sizes, larger sample sizes in other research studies that maybe focus on specific risk behaviors like sexual risk behavior. There was a student a doctoral student in Canada who had a larger sample size, found higher statistics of Muslims engaging in premarital sex. And so to really be cognizant that other studies are coming out that are reinforcing some of the findings that we've found in the study that we released in that first infographic. And also to recognize that this is just preliminary research. The Muslim community is an under-researched community, and inshallah with time there's going to be a lot more focus, a lot more funding presented towards really understanding the different types and flavors and you know, behaviors of all Muslim audiences, masjid going and non-masjid going.
And Hanan, what was surprising for you from the research?
So being involved with youth for a while now, I unfortunately want to say that it wasn't that surprising. I think it was surprising when I first found out. That part was, I was shocked, and then I was like, wow, this actually happened, and I had to quickly get over the shock to think, okay, what can I do to prevent, you know, this from happening? Like, what can I do as a community member, as a youth mentor? But yeah, unfortunately, very unfortunately, it wasn't very surprising. I actually thought the numbers were going to be higher, to be completely honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have about 5 minutes left. You know, I know that the time goes by so quickly, but what I wanted to, you know, give each of you about a minute, I guess, to share kind of what was significant about the research, and for you personally as well as professionally. I mean, Sadiq, like you said, the community is under-researched. We don't have a clear picture of, you know, currently what are the stressors, and then also, you know, I always emphasize this, for every problem we identify, we have to come with a solution. There has to be a recommendation in order to meet that challenge, or else people feel overwhelmed, you know, and then when they feel overwhelmed, they kind of turn away from the information, you know, because they don't know what to do with it, or they just feel incredibly helpless. So I wanted to give each of you a minute before we end, you know, to say what was important for you personally and professionally about the research, and what would you like to see, how would you like to see this develop in the future, you know, to expand on it? So I know a minute is a short time, but if you could kind of respond to that question. Beginning with you, Dr. Samira.
Sure. I think for me, as someone who's been active in the community for more than 20 years, for me, what I wanted to get out of this paper as well as the research is understanding the nuances of the Muslim community in terms of Muslim youth, because oftentimes I would get frustrated when people would talk about Muslim youth or this, Muslim youth or that. No, my experience and what I've seen on the ground has been that there is a lot of diversity, and that diversity, those nuances that we talked a little bit about in terms of developmental pathway, is impacted by those factors. And so it's very important that, one, that we understand those factors. Secondly, we didn't talk about this that much, but in terms of the subgroups within Muslim youth, such as the issues and challenges facing African American Muslim youth as well as convert youth, those are again another kind of subgroup difference that we need to consider. And it goes back to the realizing that when we think about youth, we need to understand the nuances so that we can better meet their needs. And I think what I've enjoyed the most has been really taking the research that we have and really applying it to the community setting, going out and doing the workshops, and really helping youth mentors, teachers, parents, realizing, okay, we have this information about the research in terms of risk behaviors, but there's something actually we can do about it. It's not kind of doom and gloom. It's, okay, here's this reality, let's do something. Here are the recommendations we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and really being able to present that to the community and giving them tools that then they can really impact and make a difference with their children as well as young people in their environment.
If I can go next, I would say, so, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, the risk and how we can help them and the research that we can do, but I think it's really important to remember that the youth themselves have ideas, and they have, you know, the capabilities of helping with those programs and helping, you know, empower other youth themselves. So really including them in the process instead of feeling like, oh, they don't know yet, or, you know, they need a little bit more time to experience life. I think it's really important to have conversations with them. You know, you'd be very surprised what these kids are thinking. I recently did a workshop with middle school girls, and they were bringing up points that I didn't think about until I was in college. So I think it's really important to include them in the conversation.
I think one thing I would like to see is inclusivity. Really focusing less on what youth aren't doing, and really focusing more on what we can do in order to bring in and be more relevant to young people. I think this research has shown me that there's so many challenges, so many different subgroups of Muslim youth, as Samira mentioned, so many mental health concerns, so many family concerns, so many lack of resource concerns. And so what can we as communities really create, like a wider, more open space where you feel comfortable being part of? And part of that process involves letting go of some of our biases, some of our own judgments, some of our mental barriers, and really accepting youth as they are, with the intention of, in the long run, this is going to be better for them.
Okay, great. I just want to remind everybody quickly before we go, please do not let another minute go by without going to the FYI, the Family and Youth Institute website. It's thefyi.org, and that information will be posted. Also, like the Facebook page, sign up for the email list. They send out great articles. I get one every day, and articles about self-harm, about how do you speak to young people, what are some of the issues. I think one was about pornography addiction. I think these are all of the things that we have to begin to really just kind of face head on. It's 2015. Our young people are inundated with so much information. So if we don't speak to them, know that they will Google information and not necessarily find anything that's accurate. So we want to make sure that we have some influence over, especially these formative years, this developmental period, so we can shape them in a way that they are empowered. They know that they come from a community that is, and the culture is inclusive, that is accepting of who they are, so that they can move in the world and feel just a greater sense of agency and of pride and of strengthen their identity. So inshallah, you've enjoyed this monthly webinar series with the Family Youth Institute. Again, I encourage you to go to the Facebook page and also the website. Contact them if you would like to bring this programming to your community. The workshops are interactive, they're engaging. You can go on YouTube as well and to find some clips to find out a little bit more information about some of the services that are provided. Also go to Muslim Wellness Foundation's Facebook page. We constantly post information there as well. And I think it's important for us to also get feedback about what are some issues or topics or challenges that the community would like us to bring forth, that you would like us to kind of to discuss and to bring more information about, so that this becomes a two-way street, that we want to know what we're doing is relevant, that is resonating, and so that we know that we're also on the right track. We'll also post later email addresses if you would like to contact the authors of the report. Again, I encourage everyone to go and actually read it. I kind of say that jokingly, but since I'm a nerd, I like to read. Everybody doesn't. But there's so much information, again, about how young Muslim women are impacted, convert youth, refugee Muslim youth, and that's kind of an area we didn't really get to touch on tonight, but thinking again about not just the Syrian crisis, but different crises around the world where young people, again, who are being uprooted from their home countries and really facing significant stress. We want to be mindful, again, if we embrace refugee families into our community, are we going to be welcoming? Are we going to embrace them? Are we going to be inclusive? Are we going to be understanding? So these are some of the things that we have to really begin to address in a very holistic and understanding way. So again, I want to thank everyone who is watching. If you have questions after the webinar is over, again, feel free to post them, tweet at us, post on Facebook, but we will welcome you back. Our next webinar for October is going to be around the idea of recognizing the signs of spiritual abuse. And this has come up when we're engaging and talking about scholars who are very influential in our community, or perhaps our local imam. How do we recognize some of the signs that, you know, perhaps the religion is being used in an abusive or negative way to influence others, and what can we do to address that as well? So I'm going to sign off. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Camila Rashad, and we definitely welcome your questions. Thank you again to the Family and Youth Institute team. You guys are incredible. I just, you know, alhamdulillah, the work that you're doing is so needed. So, you know, I pray Allah gives you, all of you guys, the patience, the strength, the wisdom, and the stamina, really, for this, because it's you know, definitely needed by the community. So, assalamu alaikum and good night.
Alaikum assalam.